Hello and welcome to e-Samvaad 2020, a two-day National Youth Conference by the Alexis Group. In its third edition, the conference includes various interactive events like lectures, workshops, and guest presentations. We wish to engage young people in meaningful discussions and conversations aimed at making India an inclusively developed country. Our aim is to enhance the learning, sharing, networking experience of our delegates by making the event intimate and people-oriented. A little bit about Samvaad. Samvaad is a platform where distinguished luminaries from the fields of politics, business, academia, entertainment, journalism, and sports come together and share the stage with leaders of tomorrow, engaging them in a dialogue while motivating them to reach to their paramount potential in pursuit of solutions to the challenges that besiege the world. It aims to foster leadership qualities among students and young professionals by opening a cross-cultural dialogue on issues of national and international relevance. This initiative is organized by a member organization of the Alexis Group, which is known as Model Governance Foundation. Model Governance Foundation is a non-profit and it's working on areas such as good governance, smart governance, national integration, and communal harmony. You could read more about the event on www.samvaad.co. Today, the guest of this session is Mr. Kunal Sood. I will briefly introduce him. Mr. Sood is an internationally renowned social entrepreneur, impact investor, and curator of the future, who has made transforming the world his life's purpose by helping positively impact lives of 1 billion people by the year 2030. Mr. Sood is the founder of X-Fellows, X-Summit, and X-Impact Group. He is focused on positively disrupting the human experience by creating a league of extraordinary citizens and experiences that make the impossible possible on Earth. And he does that by actively partnering with Fortune 500 companies, non-profits, ethical brands, and intent to make this world a better place. And these organizations include Google, SAP, Transcend, and also social enterprises such as United Nations, X Prize Foundation, and NASA. Mr. Sood is also founder of NOVUS, We the Planet, and a TED resident who has made a lot of impact in slums of Mumbai and has led global movements at UN General Assembly and also hosted our Honorable Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi. So, Kunal, welcome to e-Samvaad. This is for the first time that we are doing an e-version. The previous two editions were held at Delhi University. And we are really happy to have you with us. And as you know, the topic for today is about deglobalization and the call for self-reliant India or Atmanirbhar Bharat. So would like to know your views that what do you understand, what meaning do you make out of deglobalization, and how do you think that India can become a really self-reliant nation or Atmanirbhar in that sense?
First, I'd like to thank you for having me. Really an honor to be on your platform to inform future leaders of tomorrow like yourself who are going to truly transform the world for a better future. So I'm honored to be here and share my thoughts on this view. To begin with, if we look at globalization, it really did help humanity get to where we are here and now, but it's also had a lot of negative effects. If we really look at climate change, if we look at how we've kind of created this sickness for wealth versus value creation, right? Or wealth acquisition, more money making. I would say wealth is a good thing if it's constructed in the right way, but we've really condoned people for putting a lot of money in their pockets and not really caring as much about the collateral damage or the structural damage it has on the bottom billion, for example, in our own country, or the people that are suffering with not enough to even feed themselves or enough water to drink. As you know, one of my uh, really extraordinary experiences was when I was a global health scientist at UCSF, and then I was accepted onto this project with Harvard in the slums of Mumbai. And I went in with all these grandiose dreams of changing the world, changing India, making those people's lives the best, lives ever. And like this little bit of a grandeur of delusion, grandiosity. And when I hit the ground in Mumbai at the time, I'll never forget. I was very quickly woken up to the fact that I cannot really change their lives. In fact, the reverse was going to happen. They were going to transform my life forever. And we're talking about people in the slums. And then the greatest gift I learned was the gift of not caring about who you are or what certificate you hold from Harvard or ISB or any of these really revered institutions. But what's most important is that you are certified and honored by the community you serve. And that's something that I really took away from this experience of being in the slums of Mumbai. I became of service to them and I listened more than I spoke. And I feel that's something that is very important here and now as we go into this interesting world, as you call it, deglobalizing, which is almost happening by default if you think about it through what's happening with COVID-19. The whole world is beginning to dismantle the idea of being global. India has shut its borders, America has shut its borders to certain countries coming into the country. The world is almost becoming deglobalized by default thanks to COVID-19, right? So we see this insurgence of deglobalization, which I think is a good thing because we've become so global that we really started to take for granted this 5 billion people that don't have access still to a good life, a decent living. And we're really focused on the 2% that have all the wealth, all the power, all the means to make more money, make more acquisition in terms of power and influence. So in that sense, I feel like the COVID-19 virus is truly both a curse and a blessing. I feel like it can teach us some of the most important lessons, as you well mentioned, which is how can India become self-reliant? How can we not be afraid of the threats that some of our neighbors pose to us from time to time? How can we go back to that extraordinary way of life where we were Hindustan or Mahabharat, right? How can we bring back some of those extraordinary traditions that Indian philosophy, mythology, and history has taught us through time, which even NASA, believe it or not, utilizes even today for their astronomy and therefore their trajectory into space. How can we go back to our Vedas in a way that we infuse new life into our culture and our own way of living as a civilization? You see, one of the most powerful things I believe we can do as a country today is to set aside politics in the nation and start to truly focus on the well being of the people and the environment that we live in. That is something I really fundamentally believe Modi ji has done. He has modeled a type of leadership that I have not seen from a prime minister in India so far. He has modeled a true leadership of self reliance and collective discipline. You see, we have shown the world, even though the numbers are climbing, which is pretty much the nature of law, the natural law is that the R naught will have that spike. If it doesn't, it actually is a bad thing. So I think what's happening in India right now is healthy. You see, the same thing happened in New York. Everyone was so scared because New York was going up the charts, and we had almost 400,000 people become infected. And then it suddenly leveled off. It started to taper off. And now we see, because of course, following the guidelines of COVID-19, we see much lower rates of infection, right? And what does that have to do with the deglobalization? I think the first thing is the idea of self-discipline. When you deglobalize, you have to become more self-disciplined in the way you transact and interact with the world. With globalization, we kind of had this free rider effect where you could ride off of the coattails of somebody else's or a group's good work and goodwill, and you can just take a ride on it, and then you become someone in the world. You've made your money, you have a good life. But now you see, with COVID-19, we've seen certain businesses become almost non-existent in record time. So I feel like this virus has given us an opportunity to truly go within and start an inner transformation process as human beings to have more effective, more long term, more meaningful impact in the world. And so that's why I feel confident that this vision of deglobalization, or even this process of deglobalization, is necessary for us to globalize again in a way that India is a global force for good and serves as a model example of how we as a country can govern as a future that we all want in life. Those are my thoughts, to begin with in globalization. I feel like we are at a very powerful um, nexus where we can truly begin to realize this vision. You know, this vision can be realized through both self discipline, self reliance, as well as treating one another with deep respect and honoring the community. So that's where I feel like deglobalization and coming back to India, and India becoming much more of a global force for good as a country, within state by state, city by city, village by village, human to human, you know, will be very powerful. And I feel like COVID-19 has given us this opportunity to do that. It would be a wasted opportunity if we didn't use it, because in history we've seen, and we always love the story of the hero's journey. We don't love the story of a guy who just slept for 20 years, woke up and was a billionaire. It's one of those stories that you think of and say, wow, he's so lucky, but you don't resonate with it, you don't identify with it, you don't want to be that person. Whereas when you read the stories of Arjuna, you know in the Gita, or you read Ramayana, you know and you identify with the heroes and the protagonists in those stories, because they have lived a life that is true to themselves and in service of something that's much larger than them, right? Which we consider Bhagwan, or the divine. And I feel that is where we are headed here and now. I think we are headed as a collective to serve something that's much larger than ourselves. And I feel like that is going to be very much how we as a civilization transform into the future.
Okay, thanks a lot, Kunal, for a wonderful response. My second question will be that India opened up its economy in 1990s, early 90s, when Dr. Manmohan Singh was the finance minister, and that was due to a global financial or kind of a crisis in terms of balance of payments for India, and India had to do it and kind of adopt the neoliberal agenda and pursue globalization. It's popularly known as the LPG regime
mm,
of liberalization, privatization, and globalization, all happening side by side. But the fruits of globalization have not actually reached to a lot of people in India. Also, the fruits of affirmative action, that is reservation, has not reached to the people. So, what strategy or path do you think our government should take so that the fruits of the good things, the reforms which have happened, reach to the bottom most person or the last person in this country?
mm. That's a very good question, actually. That's a very powerful question, and something that we all need to think about very seriously going forward. Because I do believe that in order for India to succeed, there has to be a policy of no one left behind. Of the 1.4 billion people that are coming into existence in India, we must have a policy where local is global, meaning that with local action, we become truly global. With that, I mean, I'm very impressed with what Modi ji has done. For the first time, we are a global country, meaning he's really brought us to a global stage, right? Um, India's visibility has never been more popular than it is right now. And granted, there's this, liberal media force that has other points of view, and I respect their points of view. But for most part, I think we've done a fantastic job recognizing India as a true global force of the future. Now, in order for that to happen in a true sense, I think we have to reimagine capitalism within our own country. We also have to reimagine how the money is distributed within, certain sectors in order to truly allow the common man to live with a sense of true dignity, right? So for me, a big part of that is creating leadership. You see, even in India, despite everything that's happened, we don't have a resource, or even for that matter, a technology problem. We're pretty intelligent with technology. We're considered the technocrats of the world. We have some of the most powerful countries, in fact, because those companies run countries, they can be their own countries now. Google, for example, right, is a company that's led by an Indian who's from our hometown, Chennai, um, where I grew up and I was born. And then we have Satya Nadella, who runs Microsoft. So you see, these are all iconic leaders. So I really believe we don't have a resource or a technology problem here and now in India. We have more of a leadership problem. For most part, that is being solved by the current government as best they can. But I feel like we need much more. We need more leaders that empower other leaders. So I would call it the Leader of Leaders Institute, correct? Where leaders empower the common person to become a leader. You see, to have that mindset, what I believe needs to be developed in India in order for them to rise to a global significance or understand what globalization and all these private public sector schemes about is for them to really be empowered as leaders. So I believe the empowerment of the common man, the empowerment of everyone, and the common woman, I feel like there's a huge, a massive potential for women also to lead and join forces so that men and women can unite to make the impossible possible. See, we have 1.4 billion people almost now. It'll be 1.4 billion within the decade. If we can harness the gift of that number, becoming our greatest resource pool of talent, you know, and galvanize every human being to shape themselves as leaders of the future, as stewards of our planet, you know, starting with India and using India as a model nation for a social impact revolution through exponential leadership, you know, where we don't just leave India as a country that's better for the next generation, but we leave the next generation that's better for India. Because I can give you my home, I can make it beautiful, I can, you know, do it to a place where you're like, wow, and you walk in. But if you don't have the skills or the training, which is most important, to look after the house, I could come back in 3 months and it would look like something that didn't resemble what I gave it to you in. The same thing with the planet or with India as a country. I think we do need to really focus on stewardship and leadership as a foundation for allowing us to create this exponential future that we talk about with India. Because globalization is here to stay. It's going to, you know, after this COVID-19 crisis passes, we're going to see a resurgence of globalization like never before. And hopefully, we will have reimagined how we do it as a collective. But so far, I don't see COVID-19 serving uh, that purpose as well as it could have. Maybe because it hasn't scared us enough. You know, maybe we there's a part of the world that's, you know, that's reverent to protecting life, but not transforming civilization, which to me is the next transcendence or the next, the next need for especially India is to transform civilization from within India to create a very self-reliant and positive force that can truly empower everyone in all corners of the world, in all walks of life, by using India as a model nation for that. Because you and I both know that India has the most tremendous variety of heritage, tradition, folklore, you know, and these things have really shaped us. We have amazing values starting from the family. You know, that's something that I always joke when people tell me out here in America, oh, I went to India and it changed my life. You know, you'll always hear a person from a foreigner always say that if they went through the Indian experience, because they probably witnessed poverty and they witnessed the joy of how even though a child or a adult is living with so little, is able to be reverent to the idea of this is who I am, this is where I belong, and this is where I'm needed. And that's something that I really believe is uh, the gift of the Indian ethos, that bipolarism. But I'd like to see it change. I'd like to see every Indian have a true shot at life and live life with dignity and rise, you know, to a new level of life, the good life that we are blessed with.
Okay. Yeah, that's a new perspective to this issue because mostly people were thinking about resources as a solution to increasing the inclusivity and outreach. But I guess you brought in a good angle of leadership, which will be the game changer for India. And personally, I have been working on the same for last 1 decade and trying to build a youth leadership movement in India and trying to inspire young people to become a part of a nation building process. I think you have been doing similar work through different initiatives like NOVUS and X Prize and various others. Would you like to kind of brief the audience about your work, what ventures you've been involved in, and how you're making this world a better place by doing all this?
Sure. Thank you. So I started out at TED, which is TED is a conference that's about ideas worth spreading. And it's pretty extraordinary. They gave me my wings when I first did TEDx in San Francisco. My life started actually my new life, my new avatar, through loss. I lost someone that was very dear to me, who was a father figure, Dr. T.J. Cherian. He committed suicide in 2006. And when I lost him, part of me also got lost. And I started a journey into rediscovery. I didn't feel like what I was doing at the time with the family business or with, India was something that I uh, belonged or was needed. I didn't feel like that was my path at the time. So I came to America, and you and I both know studying psychology is not exactly what's something at the top of your list as as an Indian business owner. But I studied psychology to understand why my doctor hurt himself. And I studied both integral psychology, counseling psychology, as well as death and dying. So I worked in the death and dying ward for a year. And during that year, I learned so many profound lessons about the human experience, and how we have to really cherish life in every breath, in every cup of tea that you and I drink together, chai, you know, and to be able to live a life of service and something that is in service of something that's larger than you, and not to live a life always that's expected of you. I think that's something we all do. Expected of your loved ones, possibly because they have your goodwill at heart, like your parents, or, you know. But the most important thing that I learned while working in the death and dying ward was truly the idea of living a life in service of something that's larger than you, something that, you know, you cannot define as the human experience. Only you can have a felt sense of it. And that's something that really mattered. Another thing that I learned when I was in the death and dying ward was relationships matter the most. All this resource we talked about, money, you name it, the wealth, the khandan, everything that you leave behind, it really, yes, it sets up a sense of legacy, but the most powerful legacy is the one you leave in people's hearts when you leave. Because that legacy beats with every moment in time. So that's something I learned when I worked there. And then, when I went into the slums of Mumbai, as I mentioned with Harvard, I saw how these people didn't have a voice. These extraordinary barefoot researchers, but they would get up every morning with the hope of helping their community. And I learned so much about their resilience and their strength and their inner abundance. They didn't have abundance on the outside. See, that's what I mean by resources, right? They were resourceful with as little as they had, because they had this inner abundance, this inner fire, which drove them to something that was larger than themselves. Correct? And they were very God fearing human beings, meaning they believed in the divine and they accepted their circumstances, but not in a way that they were dejected or hopeless. They were very hopeful with every breath, with every day that they lived, you know, and that really inspired me to create uh, a summit. And I did this in the form of TEDx, and I actually did it in memory of my late doctor, Dr. Cherian. And I honored him. And then what happened was I started dreaming really big. I was like, how can we take this to a place where everyone can hear the voice of these unbelievable barefoot researchers and these unbelievable human beings that are doing such meaningful work, and connect the two worlds of, extraordinary power and influence to the worlds of, inner abundance, meaning and purpose. So that's when I did TEDx at the UN. And, I did that and it was an amazing experience. And after that, I decided to start my own endeavor, which was Novus. And Novus was actually in response to Trump's first campaign before he became president. He said that the American dream was dead. Now, someone who lives in America and has a lot of love for this country, as well as my own, I felt that really was something that I needed to investigate, because I didn't necessarily disagree with him, even though he made such a powerful statement. Because I'm not American, I'm Indian. Even now, I have an Indian passport, right? So I, as an a person that is a non-resident alien, or an extraordinary alien, as they call it on my O1 visa, I wanted to really investigate whether the American dream was really dead. And we had a summit around that, which was the beginning of Novus. And it was small, it was 100 people in San Francisco. And there was such a resurgence of hope and dreaming because we brought this positivity into the room, you know. And then I decided, Novus is going to be about the relentless pursuit of transformation. And we changed our transformative purpose because the UN invited us then to do something with them at the UN for the UN General Assembly, high level political forum. And at that time, we changed our massive transformative purpose to transform the world. And I had this one question: how can I transform the world if I can't even transform myself? So again, it's about that self leadership principle of how can you look within in order to be a transformative agent for those that recognize your soul. Because I believe it's about soul recognition. You know, when people look at Sadhguru or Sri Sri Ravi Shankar or these, divine souls that are out there spreading our, traditions of Hinduism and yoga, which is a gift we gave to the world, it's because there's a soul recognition as to what they're trying to do as a community. And that community is looking for that intent, that intention that allows them to become better than who they are, right? And that's what Novus recognized. So, but we also recognize that we live in a world here and now that is grounded in science, innovation, and technology, right? So the vision of Novus was to bring the two together. How can we bring the art and science of yoga, Ayurveda, and positive psychology alongside the world of science, innovation, and technology to have a positive impact on 1 billion people over the next decade, which is the UN Global Goals vision, is to achieve the 17 goals by 2030. So we felt that having these exponential technologies alongside these value driven traditions will help us garner the resources and the leadership, more importantly, the mindset and the leadership necessary to harness the resources effectively to solve for our global grand challenges. And that's how Novus was born. Through that, I realized that there is this dearth of necessity for extraordinary citizenship or exponential leadership. And that's where X Fellows was born. X Fellows was definitely inspired by Peter Diamandis, who is the founder of X Prize and the Singularity University, where I serve as an ambassador. He absolutely has inspired most of my work just through his own vision and values in action. So I wanted to put my values in action, and I said, it's very important that we have a group of extraordinary human beings come together, a small group that are highly dedicated to the idea of transformation, and have them create the satsang of the future, you know? And that to me became the X Fellows. And the X Fellows is really at its core, X Fellows is about making the impossible possible by living a life that is true to yourself and really in service of something that's much larger than you. You are driven by something that's so massive, so transformative, and so actionable that you don't stop. With life in every breath, you relentlessly pursue that objective. You see, today we can be a global citizen easily. Or not today because it's COVID-19 era, but before COVID-19, you could get on Expedia, click, 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 and you're global. You've been to 50 countries, you can travel the world in less than 80 days. And that's a global citizen, right? But I feel like here and now, what's necessary is a step above, which is extraordinary citizenship and exponential leadership. You see, more than ever before, we have to model ourselves to make our ancestors proud, right? And to make our elders proud. I don't believe that the youth should be angry with the elders. I really feel that is counterproductive. Like, you see some of these climate change movements where they say, we are angry with you, you screwed up the world. They did their best. You cannot fault, especially as an adult. You can say that as a child, maybe, but there is an expiration date where you can blame your elders or your parents for your screw ups or your future. At some point, you have to take leadership and ownership that they did their best and God bless them, you know, and it is our time, it is our responsibility to make the impossible possible, to turn around and look at these global grand challenges that they've said, left us maybe as opportunities for the future, because I really believe that's what an ex-fellow is. It's the man in the arena, the person who's a gladiator, who is not afraid of fighting the good fight, and you have to be in the arena. You can't just point a finger and, you know, say you screwed up our lives and our future, and you have to fix it. Because when did that ever work? When did scolding your parents or firing them ever work as a strategy to get them to do what you needed them to do? Right. So for me, that's the dream of We the Planet, for example, which is the new endeavor that we just launched last year, is to have the youth and the elders unite to make the impossible possible. Have women and men unite to create a new night's table where it's about shared authority and not just having a woman have a seat at the table. You know, it's about that unity that we all aspire for, but making sure that we don't just aspire, but we act in unity. And we act in ways that truly start to galvanize and realize the possibility of solving for all of these global grand challenges, whether it be COVID-19 or climate change. And that's something that I'm very passionate about here and now, is creating a global force of leaders that unite in India, especially, because I really believe India has a reverence towards our elders. You know, we understand that it's not always your parents' fault that you're messed up. You know, sometimes taking self ownership of why you are a certain way you are is the most powerful thing you can do. Even I've done that lately. Like my parents sometimes say, we really went wrong with you in some ways. That's why you're different from the usual Indian, and you're not married, or whatever they consider the targets. And I said, Mama, no, it's my fault. I want to take full responsibility for my actions as a child, as a young adult, and as a full blown adult now. You know, and I want to make things right. And I believe that's how people should live their lives, not pointing a finger and blaming your parents, or pointing a finger and blaming adults, or pointing a finger and blaming the system. If you don't agree with the system, build your own. It may be small, but if people find resonance and they see that your system is better than the one that exists, they'll join you. You see, so that's what I believe. I believe that we're at an extraordinary moment in time where we can come together without fear or favor and truly unite to make the impossible possible. As brothers and sisters, as mothers and fathers, as daughters and sons, intergenerationally, we can have an impact here and now. So that's all of my endeavors are really, that's the through line of all of the endeavors, whether I'm on the board of, a certain endeavor, or whether I support or create one. That is the through line, that, self leadership and self directed ownership of your own life, so that you can inspire others also to do the same.
Yeah, I once got an opportunity to interact with our honorable former president, Shri APJ Abdul Kalam ji, and he told me something about legacy, and he said that I asked him that what ambition we should have in life, or what should a young person uh, think about their career aspiration, what changes we should make. And he said one thing, and he said that always think about what you want to be remembered for when you are not in this world. And if you want to be and you might have at some point early as a school student, you are not clear about your career goals, but when you have the answer to this question, that what you want to be remembered for, your career goals and your mission and vision of life will be very clear. And more recently, our Prime Minister said in a public speech,
Mhm.
he has reiterated this a couple of times, that if you really want to succeed, you should have a mission in life and not an ambition.
Mm.
Uh, because if you have a mission, you will you're most likely to fulfill that ambition while pursuing that mission. So that's what has really struck with me, and I could resonate. I think what you also said about legacy, mission, and vision of your life, I could really look back and connect these dots. So we have already kind of covered 50 minutes. It passed so smoothly. Uh, didn't realize that we could broadly touch upon three main points. So, anything you would like to kind of advise the young people who are watching this broadcast? Something like a concluding remark, something like a gyan which you guess will be a life changing or life a transformational movement for young people who attended this event.
Sure. I'll share a story and then I'll conclude. Um, the most powerful thing I believe here and now we can leave is exactly what Abdul Kalam said, is an exponential legacy, one that is a legacy that echoes through eternity, not just through one generation, but through generations to come. And as a child, I was a misfit in India. I wasn't the prodigal son. I didn't do that well in school. In fact, when I went to school, I'll never forget when I joined this really cool school called Sisha, I was bullied. I was the target of bullying, not because I was, scrawny, or I was actually the opposite. I was really big and I was really strong, but I had a heart of a Labrador. So I always say I was the black Labrador of the family. So as the black lab of the family, born into a group of golden retrievers, you know, I had a lot of love. I was surrounded by a lot of love from my family. But when I went into the jungle of school, I was only in third grade. I was bullied both by the authorities as well as the students. And when you're bullied, bullies don't come in ones, they come in packs. They come in wolf packs, like three, four of them, right? And I took it and I went through the cycle. And this is a very important cycle, I feel, in India, that we don't represent, or we keep it within and then it manifests later on in life. As youth, we often don't have the vulnerability or even the courage to share, right? So we just swallow, we introject it, and we suffer with the pain, you know. And that's what I did. So I became a victim of my circumstances. I thought I didn't belong. I was useless. I used to have these fantasies of being found dead somewhere in school, and that the whole school would mourn for me, and my parents would feel sad. It was all messed up, psychological stuff as a child, right? To call for attention. So I was in that victim mentality of, maybe I'm better off dead or gone, you know. But then what happened is, you see, there's a continuum of that, which is the victim, the perpetrator, collaborator, and the bystander. Okay. And the bystander has the most amount of power in this situation. And sometimes, the people around me wouldn't show up and help me, right? And then, thank goodness, I had a couple of good mentors, and a mother and a father that really loved me, and a sister and brother that really cared. And what happened was, all of a sudden, these bullies kept coming at me. And my Atma had a very different response than the victim mentality. The victim mentality was a story I told myself, which was outside myself. And this is something that's very important for the youth to know. The stories that you tell yourself in your mind are not true, or what society deems you as. So yes, I was a black Labrador, and I loved being that person that was loyal, loving, rescue. I enjoy rescuing, but then deep inside me, I also realized that I had omnipotent power. So all of a sudden, once when these four bullies came back to bully me, I said, enough is enough. And from a black lab, I became a black panther. And that metamorphosis, that transformation, is what I invite all the youth in India to embrace. You know, in that time when you feel like you have no hope, is when you push through the pain and you come out the other side. And then that's a gift, because when you can bear your own pain, I mean, you can come out the other side extraordinarily powerful, as a Black Panther would. Then you become the guardian or the protector. And then you go from being a victim or a bystander to becoming the guardian of your community. And that's what I would leave, the youth with, is don't be afraid to harness the moral courage within. Because courage is not the absence of fear. It is the judgment that something more important than fear surrounds you and imbibes you and embodies you. And once you find that Krishna consciousness that allows you to rise above the egoic mind that tells you stories, and you go from your head into your heart, and you let your heart rule your avatar, whether it's a black Labrador or a black panther, or whether it's a lion or whatever, creature you identify with, a tiger, a bird, a phoenix. The point that I'm trying to make is that moral courage and the capacity to withstand pain and turn it into hope, and then allow that pain to become the greatest gift you can endure, so that you can bear your pain and then you can bear others' pain. And that's when you truly become a leader, is when you can bear others' pain in a way that you help them also rise and hold each other hand in hand and walk together as a fellowship, the brotherhood, the fellowship. That's what I believe is most important here and now, is to, really embrace both the love within as well as the strength and the pain to rise above and become the best you can be. So that's what I would leave, uh, the youth with, is never give up. You can make the impossible possible, and that you're not alone. You have me, you have Aditya, come to us and we will help you, because that's what true leaders do. Leaders create leaders. And that's what I believe in. And that would be an exponential legacy and a life worth living. So that's my last bit of gyan, as we call it in India, or words of wisdom that I'd like for everyone to know, is that you can become a bully's bully and transform into a protector of the nation, of your community, of your family, of the ones you love. And that's when you know you are a true, extraordinary citizen of the world.
Thanks a lot, Kunal, for such a powerful message. And I think a lot of people ask me what Alexis means. So I would like to, through this broadcast, tell them that
Yeah,
Alexis means the defender and protector of people.
I
And
love that.
that's what kind of propelled me to kind of choose this name, and that's what my mission is in life, that and I think we have a shared mission here, that how we can create and nurture more leaders for this country, and how we can make the world a better place to live in. So thanks a lot
Thank
for
you.
sharing your valuable time with us, and thanks for your views. I guess the young people watching this broadcast will be re-energized, and will have re reimagine how they can kind of live and lead with dignity and with courage, and be more productive for the country and not just for themselves. So,
Yeah.
thanks a lot, Kunal.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Aditya, for having me. It's been an honor and a special pleasure.